All right, we're back with True Law Stories. I've got attorney Tim Semelroth, one of the nation's premier experts in truck accident law from Iowa. Tim, thanks for being on True Law Stories.
I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And Tim has some amazing stories. When we first started talking about, I'm like, wow, we need to talk about these because it just real people with whose lives are massively changed. And we don't think about this, but truck accidents happen, and they happen often and more often. I mean, I know I'm driving down like 95 and stuff, and I'm just always scared of the trucks. So, Tim, tell us a little bit about your practice, and then we'll talk a little bit about Katie's story. But tell us first a little bit about your background in getting into truck accident law.
Sure. So I'm part of the largest personal injury and disability firm in Iowa. But over the years, I handled all kinds of injury cases, car accidents, workers' compensation claims, medical malpractice cases. But I realized pretty early on that the type of cases that I enjoyed representing people in most were truck accident cases. And so I focused my practice towards truck accident cases over the years, and now that's almost exclusively what I do.
And we'll get into it a little bit in the stories, but what's at a high level, what's the difference between a car accident and a truck accident case?
Well, over 75,000 pounds typically, if it's a fully loaded semi. And so the reality is that you are not dealing with a minor whiplash case if you're hit by a truck. So number one, the injuries are more severe. Secondly, trucking is a highly regulated industry, and those rules, if they're followed, help keep us all safe. And the economics of getting trucks and all of the goods that they're carrying from point A to point B place a lot of pressure on trucking companies, on drivers to break those rules, and that puts all of us on the road at risk.
Massive risk. I mean, I personally have family members who have been injured in these massive accidents. And when it comes to investigating the accidents, I mean, it's a motor vehicle. I know it's 75,000 pounds, but what are the big differences that you've learned over the years?
Well, now in 2025, one of the biggest differences is the fact that there is a black box in semi-trucks that tells you more and more each year about how fast the vehicle is going, when there was a braking incident. Now there are telematics that tell us how long the driver has been on the road, that tell us how far away other vehicles were before particular events. And so one of the first key steps in any truck accident case is to be able to download all that information, be able to grab the dash cam footage, because that tells you a lot about how the crash happened, even when your client didn't survive and can't tell their story.
So let's get into some of the stories, because I think it brings it to life, and that's the name of the show too. Tell me a little bit about Katie. Who was she?
Katie was a mom who was driving her sick child to the doctor on a snowy day. That's why she had to be on the road that day. And she was getting ready to make a turn, and she slowed down. She had her turn signal on, and a semi that frankly shouldn't have even been on the road that day, given the snowy conditions, slammed into her from behind, knocked she and her child off the road, and caused injuries that she'll be dealing with for the rest of her life.
So, and you say the semi shouldn't have been on the road. Are there laws around that?
Absolutely. So one of the important things that you need to know if you're handling truck accident cases are the national regulations that govern driving a semi-truck. And one of those says that in a situation where you have weather conditions that affect traction or visibility, that you need to drive with extreme caution. Mm-hmm. And what extreme caution means depends upon the situation, but is further defined by the commercial driver's license manual, and it explains that in a situation where the weather causes it to be icy, slippery, that a truck driver needs to get off the road at the first available opportunity.
Oh, really?
In
Wow.
order to make sure that it's safe for everybody else.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I mean, it makes complete sense. But you definitely see people, you see trucks all the time. I mean, I'm here in Florida, and I know I've driven in New York, and I'm like, this truck. I've been in Denver, Colorado, and I was like surrounded by semis in the middle of a blizzard, and it's frightening. You know, like they could easily lose control.
Absolutely. And that's why there are specific regulations, there's specific training that the industry has. The problem is that truck drivers are often, they're victims too in this, because their company is pushing them, hey, you've got to get this delivery done on time. You have to do this. And ultimately, the truck driver has to decide between following the law or keeping their job if the dispatcher's in their ear yelling at them that they've got to get to the next location.
That's wow. Yeah, because also we'd think when this happens, like my first instinct was, well, blame the truck driver. And then you mentioned that, and I'm like, oh, if that makes complete sense too. It's like they're not necessarily the bad guy. Yes, I know, because we've done some cases where the truck driver was the bad guy, but I think a lot of people think that, hey, I'm just end up suing this nice old truck driver, right?
No, and that's where another key difference between a car accident case and a truck accident case is you have to investigate why the crash happened. Not just that somebody was driving too fast or they turned left without looking. It really comes down to an investigation as to why they're on the road. And in Katie's case, it was because the owner of the trucking company wanted one more load to be done before they stopped for the day. And that's what put this driver in a position to be driving too fast for conditions.
Oh my gosh. So let's talk about, I mean, because we just said Katie got in an accident. Tell me a little bit about what happened to her and her daughter.
Well, it was actually her son.
I'm sorry, her son. Yes,
Yeah,
her son.
but she suffered a spinal injury. It required surgery, and the reality is that she never completely healed. She lives every day with chronic pain, and that is something that she isn't. She hasn't just given up. She transitioned to a new job that allows her to to deal with to manage her pain better. But she works as a school counselor now, and some of the most compelling evidence at trial was about her having to shut the door to her office partway through the day and lay on a heating pad and try to get enough relief that she could make it to the end of the school day.
Yeah, I mean, people don't think about the long-term ramifications. I mean, like I mentioned personally, family. I know family who, we even had team members here who had to sit on special cushions. 2 out of 10 of our team members, right, had to sit, and they're gonna have to sit on special cushions for the rest of their life. I mean, and they were in minor accidents. But I want to go back, because tell me a little bit about like that moment from the time she got hit and going to the hospital. Did she, how does someone handle something like that? Because I know when something like that happens, it's not like instantly people call an attorney and they're so confused.
No, well, Katie grew up on the farm. She is a tough woman, and she truly believed that once she had surgery, she was going to get better. And so her first call was not to a lawyer. She would be the first to tell you that, she never saw herself as somebody who would ever sue anybody. But the reality is that as the medical bills piled up, as the pain continued, and when she realized that the truck driver was actually blaming her for what happened, that's when she realized that she was going to need to hire a lawyer if she wanted justice in this situation.
How did the truck driver blame her for this?
At the scene, the truck driver suggested that she did not have her turn signal on, that she stopped suddenly. And then later, the truck driver's attorneys tried to claim that that Katie was at fault for driving that day in such bad weather.
Now, one big topic is always insurance, because everyone, the insurance companies are really good, whether it's your insurance or another insurance company, of being friendly to you until they're not friendly. What was her experience with that?
Well, at first, she, she got the call that most people do when they've been involved in a crash. The other side's insurance company calls, wants to interview her. Of course, she isn't even thinking about having a lawyer at this time. And so we have the transcript of that call. And at that point, Katie's like, I'm hoping, I think I'm starting to feel better. And, I want to get back to work soon. And all those things, all that you hope people feel like, that they want to do. The insurance company tried to use all of those statements against her.
Oh my gosh.
To suggest that, oh, well, look, within a week of the accident, she was claiming that she was starting to feel better. So now, a couple of years after the fact, she's obviously just doing this for money, when that couldn't have been further from the truth.
So it was a couple of years after. Tell me a little bit about that timeline.
Sure. Well, the reality is that the doctors didn't initially think that she was going to need surgery. She had some broken bones that they made sure were set properly and were healing on their own. But it was only over the course of weeks and months that she realized that she was having this pain in her neck that was radiating into her arm. Eventually, the doctors did an MRI, and that's when they realized she needed neck surgery. But that didn't even occur for months after the crash. And so if you would have talked to her at any point in the first 6 months after the crash, she would have told you, hey, I think I'm going to get better. I'm going to get over this. And so she has surgery. She believes that surgery is going to be the thing that's going to fix her. And so she still has faith. And it's not until months after the surgery when she realizes, oh no, this is going to be something I'm dealing with for the rest of my life.
And you talked about a little bit about, I think this is a big thing, is people don't, until that happens to you, or until you have a severe injury, you don't think about how it's going to affect the rest of your life, right? Especially if you're tough. Like, I know I've had multiple sports injuries, right? And it's like, you kind of push past it and you start to ignore it. But what was going on in Katie's life once, even in between the surgery, but after the surgery, besides, obviously having to close the door, but how was it affecting like her family life?
Well, it was having a huge impact because she's part of a very big family. She and her husband, have 3 kids. And so as she tried to get back and do the things that she was doing before, being able to sit on the bleachers and cheer her sons at wrestling meets, or going for family vacation to a indoor water park, with the extended family, her family members were seeing that, hey, there's a problem here. Katie couldn't sit on the bleachers through a full wrestling meet. She would have to sit in the car with the heat on, in her car, waiting for her husband to call her and say, hey, our son's going to be up next, so that she could walk into the gym and watch him wrestle and then go back to the car where she had some support for her neck and back. Or at the water park, the families told me when I interviewed them that she was the type of mom who would go on the water the water slides with her youngest child, and would pick somebody up out of the lazy river, and how instead this trip just became a situation where she was either sitting on the edge of the pool, or she more often than not, she would be back in the hotel room while everybody else was having fun.
That's, I mean, yeah, those, I mean, those moments are priceless. It's like, I know, like if I miss like my son's football game or whatever, even if I'm just out of town, I feel horrible. I can't imagine just constantly having to miss that. And so, tell me, like at the point, like when she's like, I need to talk to an attorney. What happened?
Well, she went to her hometown lawyer, and her hometown lawyer realized this is a truck accident case. We need to have a specialist. And so that lawyer then referred Katie to me because this is what I do.
And what were Katie's, tell me about that. Like when you first saw the case, what were your initial reactions?
Well, initially I realized that we were going to have a fight on our hands because, I could see the statements that the truck driver had made to law enforcement. They weren't just going to roll over and admit that they were at fault for this, but just as importantly, because Katie had had so many stops and starts with her medical treatment as she was trying to get better, because she didn't want to go to the doctor every day. She would say, "Oh, well, let me just give it time." And I knew, because I've been dealing with insurance companies for over 25 years, that at each one of those gaps in treatment were going to be used by the insurance company to say, "Hey, look, she got better, and something new must have happened. Don't blame us."
Yeah. And when you say you had a fight in your hand, how do you now prepare for that fight when she goes, okay, let's do this? I mean, and what's different about preparing to battle a trucking company or a commercial vehicle company versus, someone else's automotive insurance?
Well, the first step was trying to figure out what evidence we had available. And unfortunately, there was evidence that we didn't have, because what a lot of people don't realize is that federal law allows trucking companies to start destroying records within 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And so in Katie's case, we never had the opportunity to download the truck. We never had the opportunity to look at the driver's logs to see exactly when the truck driver's trip began and how many loads they had taken that day. So we were limited to the information that law enforcement had gathered. Thankfully, law enforcement in this case had done a pretty good job of taking photographs of, for example, Katie's tail lights and the mechanisms, so that we were able to prove that, no, she had her turn signal on when this happened. And then one of the things that ended up being a big fight was they also were able to, the trooper had also pulled the traffic camera. And so you could see part of what happened. Unfortunately, the scope of the shot was relatively limited, and so it allowed the truck driver to claim that there had been a sudden gust of snow just before he came on camera that had blocked his view of Katie. And so we started by gathering the physical evidence. I met with the trooper and had him go through everything in the investigative file, so I knew what was there. And then, of course, I met with Katie's doctors just to make sure that we had people who were going to support, what all her family was telling me, is that this was this injury caused a problem that did not exist before, and that continued to exist up until the present day.
And I always find that's fascinating, especially like any type of litigation, but especially accident litigation, is you have to be an expert in so many different things. It's not just the law, is it?
Right. I mean, so much of trucking litigation is being familiar with not just the laws, but the regulations, how truck drivers are trained, and then the technology in the trucks. I tell people there's a reason why I went to truck driving school for lawyers, so that I could be I could see what it's like behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, drive it during the day, drive it at night, back it up. Because until you've had that firsthand experience, it's really hard to understand what the truck driver is facing, what they can see, and what they're dealing with on the road.
Yeah. It's funny because I know some people that drive trucks, but complete side note, my Uncle Bill was a World War II veteran, and he would come down and pick us up from school sometimes, and he drove crazy, and he'd be like, as long as you get the front end through, it's fine. And I'm like, oh. But yeah, because that gives you such a perspective, but you also, because we were talking about it before, you also, I mean, you're not just like, I hate truck drivers, you educate them too, don't you?
Yes. I have spoken to conferences that truck drivers, trucking company executives are at, because the reality is that I'm on the road with my family. I would much rather truck drivers follow the rules and drive safely. It keeps all of us safe. The thing about a semi is it doesn't just put the truck driver at risk, it puts everybody on the road at risk if they're not following the rules.
And so back to Katie's case, you do all the investigation. At what point did you know, hey, we're going to have to take this to trial?
When first of all, there was a settlement offer that was made. That settlement offer did not take into account any of the future medical treatment that Katie was going to need. They refused to take responsibility for that. And when I asked them why, the lawyer for the trucking company said that they were going to claim act of God as a complete defense to the case. And he thought that they had a good chance of being successful, and then Katie would get nothing. And so therefore, Katie should take half a loaf rather than go to trial and end up getting nothing.
And when you say half a loaf, what, I mean, because a lot of people perceive, personal injury attorneys as just greedy, trying to get as much money as possible. People that sue is getting as much money as possible. What was the full loaf, and what did that mean?
Well, so in a personal injury case, you can ask for medical expenses, past and future medical expenses. You can ask for lost wages. You can ask for loss of future earning capacity. Because Katie was able to transition to that school counselor job, we didn't ask for that. But then you have loss of function and pain and suffering. And so it was very important to Katie that her family never have to pay out of pocket for the future medical treatment that she was going to need to manage her pain. And so she knew that there was a possibility in the future that she was going to need to have regular injections, maybe another surgery down the road as she got older. And she didn't want that to be a financial burden on her family. And so the insurance company offered a settlement amount that wasn't going to cover all of those things in the future. And so, that's why she decided that we're going to go to trial and we're going to fight.
And tell me about preparing for trial.
Well, one of the things that I enjoy most about representing people like Katie is really getting to know their story. And so I interviewed, probably 15, 16 people from her life, coworkers, fellow school volunteers, of course, her husband and her brothers and sisters, and and their relatives. And so you really get a full picture of somebody, and you realized, okay, certain people can be really powerful witnesses. So, for example, in Katie's case, the first witness we called was her brother, because her brother was driving down the road shortly after the crash occurred, and medical personnel were already there, but he drove right past the accident and didn't realize it was his sister.
Oh my God!
And so, the reason why he was driving that day, and here's the thing that was also really powerful, is because he himself is a truck driver. And he realized that the roads were too bad to be driving truck that day. And so that's why he wasn't driving his route.
Oh, wow.
He was actually driving to go help he and Katie's father with some snow removal because he knew it wasn't safe. And so that was a really powerful witness, because here he is, a reasonable truck driver who looked at the weather and decided it's not safe to drive on the road that day. And yet the defendant in this case did not.
And I mean, that's powerful. Tell me a little bit about like the investigation, preparing for trial, because you didn't have the black box. Did you create anything to reconstruct this, or how did you demonstrate this in trial?
Well, a lot of it was done with the trooper who investigated the accident. So we had him break down the footage. We were putting up pictures of the taillights, the broken taillights, and having him point out that this shows, based upon the way that the filament in the taillight was shaped, that we know that it was lit at the time. And so it was a lot of taking the physical evidence that he gathered, breaking it down piece by piece, and then having him educate the jury about what all those things meant.
And pre-trial, was there one thing, was it the testimony, was there one thing where you're like, oh, we've really got this? Or did you feel like that ever pre-trial?
Oh, I mean, we believe that our case was a good case. It was a strong case. I mean, the reality is that, Katie turned down, a significant amount of money because it wasn't enough to go to trial. But during trial, it's always a fight.
Yeah.
And so there are times where you feel like the day is going well for you. You feel like the day isn't going well for you. But the only time where I felt like, yeah, we're absolutely going to win this for sure was during the defendant's closing argument, when he was explaining why the trucking company should have to take no responsibility because this was an act of God. One of the jurors looked at me and rolled her eyes when he said that. And I said, well, I think we
got that one
in good shape. Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people are scared to do this, scared to go to trial. Why is it so important, even if they don't want to go to trial, to prepare? Why was it important to prepare to go to trial?
Well, because the reality is most of my cases don't go to trial. They settle. But they settle for a fair amount because the insurance company knows that if we go to trial, there's a risk that they're going to have to pay even more. Mm-hmm. And so I've talked to many insurance representatives over the years, and they all tell me that one of the most important factors when they decide how much to pay is, does that lawyer have a track record of going to trial and being successful? And so if you go to a lawyer who never tries a case, never gets to trial, then you're going to be taking a discount on your settlement.
Mm. So you're at trial. How long did the trial take?
It took a little over a week.
So Katie's trial, you mentioned the juror rolling their eyes, but still, I mean, it's ups and downs through the week, right?
Yes. And what we have to rely upon is that everything was going according to plan. We were able to tell Katie's story. We weren't being prevented by the judge from not being able to bring up certain pieces of evidence. And so in a trial, it ultimately comes down to those people in the jury box and whether or not they believe what you're sharing with them. And so we felt like we were telling her story the best way we possibly could, the most effective way we possibly could. And luckily for us, the jury was buying what we were selling.
And I always love to know, tell me about the deliberation and then finding out the verdict.
So in Iowa, most civil verdicts are sealed verdicts. So in other words, you don't sit in the courtroom waiting for the jury to come back.
Okay.
What happens is the parties leave. You then get a call from the judge the judge then, gets both lawyers on the phone and reads off the verdict, and then you have a chance to call Katie and you call your client. And so we got the call from the judge, we got the verdict, and then I was able to call Katie, and the very first thing I told her was, "You were right to fight. The jury agreed with you, and now you're going to have the money to take care of your medical treatment."
Wow. How'd that feel?
It felt great. And it felt great because Katie is such a good person, and her family are such good people that, you definitely knew that you were, fighting on the right side in that case.
What was Katie's reaction?
It was relief. It was relief that the jury believed her. It was the relief that she wasn't going to have to burden her family with medical bills going forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that, Katie goes buys a new Ferrari and new house, and it's this lottery, and we see all the billboards in it, and we kind of feel like the billboards look like lottery billboards. It's not the case, though, is it?
No, not at all. The reality is that Katie paid off bills, and as far as I know, put the most of the money in an account that she can use to pay for the medical treatment she needs, without feeling guilty that she's taking that money away from her family.
That's great. Well, this is awesome. For those of you who join us, don't forget to subscribe to True Law Stories, and also connect with Tim on LinkedIn. He's very active on LinkedIn, tells some amazing stories. We'll see you in the next episode.